Ramesh from Chess Gaja. We continue our coverage of the Uzbek team, which ultimately won the gold medal in the 44th Chess Olympiad. And we make our way through the team to look at the tactics, top three tactics employed by the Uzbek grandmasters in the 44th Chess Olympiad. Today, the grandmaster that we will be following is Jakhongir Vakhidov, who played on who belonged to the Uzbekistan team, who ultimately did uh, win the 44th Olympiad, and who played on board 4 for the Uzbek team. So without any further ado, let's dive straight into the tactics that he employed throughout his run at the Chess Olympiad. This is round 4. It's Jakhongir Vakhidov versus Sam Shankland from the United States of America, and as you can see, it is we have already moved towards the end game where two rooks are on the board, one for each of the players, and you can see that Sam Shankland is actually a pawn up over here. There's 3 pawns for white. Sorry, there's 3 pawns for white, which is Jakhongir, and 4 pawns for black, which is Shankland. So we know that in such tight end games where it's just a rook and a few pawns, each and every pawn counts well because you can exchange the remaining pawns, and the opponent will still be a pawn up, and you can always just promote that pawn. It's basically it's messy. If you're a pawn down, you mostly, more often than not, you lose the game. But obviously this is not the case here, as you can already see. There's half a point each besides the names of the players, so this game ended in a draw. We all know that now. But yeah, so the last move that played was b4. Here the engine suggests that the best move was a captures on b4. But what Vakhidov does do is a4, which engine says as it's a blunder. But you can see why he did what he did, why Vakhidov did what he did, and I'll show that to you after a few more moves that we see. So a4, obviously Shankland pushes the pawn. He plays b3, rook to h6 check, king to g7, and now rook to b6, getting behind this pawn. Obviously, there will be another pawn push to protect the pawn because the rook nicely guards the pawn here. But now there is no real way to promote the pawn, right? After b2, rook to b5, just putting some pressure on this pawn. Maybe if this pawn is dealt with in sometime in the future, this pawn is also dying. This pawn is also under a threat. Too many threats, right? And king to g6, king to e7. Trying to promote his own pawn, which is on the 7th rank now. Obviously, Shankland won't allow this a series of checks and repetitions, and this is where the players call it a draw. However, the point is, uh, I'll show you what I told you earlier. What happens if you do capture here, as the engine suggests so valiantly? So if you capture here, obviously a captures on b4 is coming again, and now this is a nice passed pawn. That pawn was also passed pawn, but your rook will take longer to come into the game now, because after this maybe you do this, but the rook can always come here, and now the pawn will start pushing. You can take your rook back, and ultimately sometime you will have to take your king out somewhere over here in order to promote your pawn also. And at that time, the rook can simply just come and check the king, and I'm sorry, and it will be a nice pawn promotion. I think you might be a little confused. I'll just show you what I mean. Let's say the opponent plays something like this here, so you simply check, right? uh, as long as the opponent is as long as the opponent's king is somewhere here, you can always just keep checking it, and you will have a field day of it, right? But what happens if the opponent does not move his king, because he knows that the king moving the king will result in checks? So let's say he plays something like I don't know, uh, rook to b5, then you just push your pawn. I'm just wasting moves here because even the white pieces don't have much to do here. So I'm just, in order to show what I was planning, something like this. And now whatever you do, Like you cannot move your king anywhere because as soon as the king moves, this check, it just queens for you. So that's the point basically. If 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 the pawn is captured over here, the rook will be too late to come into the game, and the pawn can easily promote. The pawn holds a threat to promote. That it would have been a draw even otherwise. No one is no, Sam Sanglen obviously won't blunder away a pawn promotion. I'm sorry, Jakhongir Vakhidov obviously won't blunder the pawn promotion away. But it's just safe this way, It's just safer this way, playing a4. So yeah, that's one thing that Jakhongir Vakhidov does. He denies he refutes to to prove the engine right, and he goes his own way, but he still gets a draw, which is pretty impressive considering again that Sam Shankland is a pawn up. So yes, that was the first tactic from round four. This is round nine. Round nine, Jakhongir Vakhidov playing the black pieces against Robert Hohansian. I'm sorry for the pronunciations. He's an Armenian grandmaster. So I'm sorry if I pronounced the name wrong. But yes, so Robert is playing the white pieces, Jakhongir is playing the black pieces, and this is move 30 of the round 9 in the 44th Chess Olympiad. So the last move that Robert played was C captures on D5. There was a pawn on D5, C captures on D5, and this is a good pass pawn now, right? With the rook already behind the pawn to ensure that the it reaches the way to glory safely. Now Jakhongir has some reason to worry because it is already on the fifth rank. Three tiny steps, and it will promote. You blink your eye, and the opponent is promoted to a pawn or to a queen or a rook or whatever, and you just resign instantly after that. But Jakhongir is very chill. He's like, okay, yeah, you got nothing, brother. So he equalizes on material first. So rook captures on b4, and obviously pawn push by Robert. That's d6. Now, obviously, since the knight is being attacked, you want to move it, and this is the best square to move it to keep it in the game. So knight to c6, rook to d5, doubling down on the file where the passed pawn is. This will soon race away if you're not very careful because there are two rooks behind it now. This bishop can come into play at any time, not from here obviously, but somehow if you're not very careful. So, Jakhongir is like, okay, yeah, you still got nothing. You might just you make your batteries on the D file. It doesn't matter. I know what I have got to do to stop that pawn, and I'm not at all worried. It's so deep inside my territory. So rook captures on B2, bishop to G2, and now Jakhongir he just goes for he initiates the defense against the passed pawn on d6. So knight to d4, brilliantly played because this cuts off the battery. The two rooks are no longer connected. Obviously, you cannot capture it because the pawn protects it. And d4 is a dark square, so the light square bishop has nothing on it. Right. This is a brilliant move. So you cut off the battery, you render it useless. This rook has no place to go to on the file now on the d file. So if it ever has to move, it has to come here or here, right? And as soon as the rook moves, you can just gobble up the pawn. So it's a brilliant move by Jakhongir Vakhidov. Obviously, pawn push creating some room for the rook to maybe go in if the rook is ever attacked, and so as not to trap the rook. But it doesn't really matter. D7, rook to B5, offering a pawn trade, and you have to kind of take it here because if the rook goes here with the check, the king just comes here, and then you lose the pawn. It does happen eventually. So actually, you should have Robert should have taken the exchange here. At least he could have doubled the pawns. He wouldn't have. Yeah, he could have doubled the pawns because if you kill with the knight, then the pawn is protected. And you have to bring in your king, and it's just messy. So yeah, he could have done that, but no, he goes for rook to d6 check, and obviously as I foretold, uh, king to e7, and now we lose the pawn. The rook to h6, and the rook on d8 just gobbles up the pawn. So even if the pawn was so deep inside the territory, he doesn't really care. Vakitov doesn't care. He's like, hey, you got nothing. I got it all under control. And in that process, he gobbles up the two pawns on. Sorry, he gobbles up the two pawns on b4 and b2. So he's 2 pawns up now. And the passed pawn, the supposed passed pawn, which was very strong with the rook battery on the d file, it's no longer there. So obviously you lose the game from here. You should resign actually, because you're 2 pawns down in an end game where all four rooks are on the board. The rooks will soon get exchanged and you will lose the game. Ultimately, Jakhongir Vakhidov does win the game, so kudos to him. But this is how Vakhidov defends this position very calmly, very coolly. Uh, he not just defends the position, but he counterattacks also with by capturing the 2 pawns. So brilliant play by him. Finally, this is the last tactic for the day, round 10. It's Jakhongir Vakhidov playing the white pieces against Adhiban B of India 2. This game ends in a draw, obviously, as you can see. But so Jakhongir plays the last move as queen to f3. Here, knight captures on d4. It's an interesting sacrifice. Uh, so Adiban had some plans that Adiban had some plans after this very obvious e captures on d4, but he doesn't really. I'm sorry. Jakongir Vakhidov doesn't really care about it. He just takes the sacrifice anyways. And here, this was basically the plan that he had in mind. The queen doesn't really have a place to go to. You know, uh, I mean, the queen obviously cannot remain on the same diagonal because well, the bishop will just kill it. Um, and the queen cannot really go here. It cannot go here. It cannot go here because of the rook. It's just slightly messy, So after bishop to g4, attacking the queen. Uh, Adiban doesn't really care about. I'm sorry, Jakhongir doesn't really care about the queen. He's like he plays the rook to e1. Now obviously the queen is hanging here, but he doesn't care at all. He's like, okay, uh, I'll just show you what happens if the queen is captured here. Bishop captures on f3, and you resign here, right? You lost the queen. You blundered with the queen. Like, what even was that move? But rook captures on e8 is checkmate because this square on h7 is beautifully covered by the bishop on d3. So even in the last game I showed, the last tactic, uh, Vakido is really cool about it. He's like, you're attacking my queen. I don't really care whether you just I just made you in one move. Uh, so that's what he does. Obviously, Adhiban B sees this. He's a good player himself. So he plays queen captures on d4, but again the king is under check, and I would be worried if I was playing white right now because the queen is still hanging. But again, Vakido is like, oh, you got nothing. So he plays bishop to e3, blocking the check and counter attacking, offering a queen trade. But obviously, Adhiban cannot trade because he's down materially right now. So queen captures on d3, just grabbing a free piece. But now obviously queen captures on g4. Obviously, Wakido could have captured this bishop on g4 as soon as he played it. He could have captured it immediately as well. But then he just wanted to tempt Adiban into taking this queen, because a queen taking queen by bishop sounds so tempting, right? But maybe to see if Adiban would fall in the trap and like blunder away a checkmate, but obviously doesn't. So after the series of exchanges, Jakhongir Vakhidov is actually a piece up against the pawn. So brilliant play by him once again. So yes, those were the three tactics that were employed by Jakhongir Vakhidov in the 44th Chess Olympiad. He did not lose a single game. He played 8 games, if I'm not wrong, in the 44th Chess Olympiad, and he did not lose even a single game. He drew 3 games, two of which we showed you today, and he won the rest of his games. So brilliant performance by him. A very young player indeed. And yeah, those were the 3 tactics that he employed. I hope you guys understood the tactics and enjoyed the video. That's all from my side for today. Thank you very much for watching the video.